Welcome to 7 Murals by Philip Orenstein, a French-Jewish perspective on France during World War II. We'll hear from Paris-born child survivor and visual artist Philip Orenstein, followed by a conversation with Dr. Nadine Orenstein. Afterwards, we'll open the event to Q&A, so please post your question in the Q&A or the chat section. I'm Rachel Stern, Director and CEO of the Fritz Ascher Society for Persecuted, Ostracized, and Banned Art based in New York. We research, discuss, publish, and exhibit artists whose life and work were affected by the German Nazi regime between 1933 and 1945. Inspired by a visit to his birth country in the 1990s, Philip Orenstein created 7 large-scale murals about the French complicity in the persecution of Jews in France during World War II. At that time, the French government had not admitted it had taken part in the persecution. In 1999, William Zimmer wrote in the New York Times, "Mr. Orenstein's method involves combining poignancy with the determination that the viewer not miss the story. To this end, Mr. Orenstein skillfully and wittily employs the look of today's splashy graffiti." Quote end. Philip Orenstein is a visual artist and professor emeritus of art at Rutgers University. He was born in Paris, France in December 1938. After World War II in 1949, his family emigrated to the United States. He majored in physics at Rutgers University. Orenstein also painted, studied art history, and took a course in modern art history with Alan Caprow, who encouraged him to quit physics and become an artist. After graduating from Rutgers, Orenstein moved to New York in the early 1960s, where he painted, sculpted, and designed for a decade. In 1971, he began teaching studio art at Rutgers University, eventually becoming a tenured professor and teaching art at Rutgers for 30 years. Orenstein has an extensive exhibition record dating from 1964 to the present. After his presentation, Philip Orenstein will speak with his niece. Dr. Nadine Orenstein is the True Heinz curator in charge of the Department of Drawings and Prints in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where she has been active as a curator since 1992. She has written and lectured extensively on 16th and 17th century prints and drawings. Her exhibitions include Peter Bruegel the Elder, Drawings and Prints in 2001, Hendrik Holzius, Prints, Drawings and Paintings in 2003, Infinite Jest, Caricature and Satire from Leonardo to Levine, 2011, and The Mysterious Landscapes of Hercules Sagers, 2017. The Renaissance of Etching, 2019-2020, co-organized with the Albertina Vienna, was awarded the 2020 IFPDA Foundation Book Award. Following their conversation, we'll open the event to Q&A, so please post your questions. Welcome, Philip and Nadine. The floor is now yours, Philip. And let me start the presentation so we see what we're talking about. There we go.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm going to start my talk with this painting. This is a painting I did in 1963 in my studio in New York. And it's 8 feet tall. It's paint, enamel paint on masonite. In the late 60s, maybe early 70s, my sister-in-law, Gloria Orenstein, came to my studio and looked at this painting. Gloria is an academic and critic and has written extensively on women artists, especially women of surrealism. So she looks at the painting and she says, "What is all these crosses?" And I looked at it and I was taken back. Why the crosses to me were just patterns that seemed to activate the surface. And then I thought for a while, yes, what are these crosses? And then I knew exactly what these crosses were. What they were is that unconsciously, World War II was appearing in my work. During World War II, we were mostly living in this small town on the edge of Normandy. And at the time, I don't remember seeing any swastikas or red flags or anything like that. But looking at the window out of the kitchen, I saw a lot of convoys of German armor and trucks, and they all bore these black crosses. So unconsciously, these black crosses are part of.
Philip, you're frozen. Philip? Philip, you're frozen. Can you go out and come back in, please? Okay, I think this works now. Philip?
Unmute.
Please unmute, Philip.
Of course, this was working fine just before.
Yes, exactly right. Philip, can you please unmute?
Oh, it's frozen again.
I didn't think at that time that I wasn't surprised about the fact that these were black crosses and they were part of my paintings. But I didn't, at that time, I didn't think of including my experiences and the war in my work. I was busy trying to be a mainstream American artist, and that didn't really enter. Then in 1988, my wife, Joyce, and I both had sabbaticals, and we decided to spend the time in Paris. And it was the first time that I lived in Paris since I left Paris and France in 1949. So the experience at that time was I felt that I was reattaching my childhood to my adulthood. My childhood was this war experience and other things after the war. And my adulthood was, I'm an artist and working. So I started thinking about seriously adding the war and dealing with the war in my art. And this was in around 1989 when we came back to the US. I decided to seriously work on paintings and drawings and about how I was going to approach the subject. It was complicated, and it took me a while to really settle on what kind of form and technique I was going to use. Okay, so the next slide. In 1991, at Rutgers, I got a bigger studio. And I don't know if any of you have seen the film, The Horse's Mouth with Alec Guinness. Alec Guinness plays an eccentric artist. this sounds like an oxymoron. He was an eccentric artist, and every time he saw an empty wall, he thought of a painting to fit it. So it was a small wall or a big wall or a gigantic wall. So basically, that's what I was doing with this place. I had a large studio, and I was going to do a painting. Here in this slide, you can see about the size of the painting that I'm going to show you next. So in 1992, people, in France was starting to talk about the 50th anniversary of the Veldiv Roundup. And I decided, after reading Serge Klarsfeld's book on the children of the Holocaust, the French children of the Holocaust, that I would do a large painting about the Veldiv Roundup. And this is what I came up with, and the metaphor here is a Paris wall with graffiti, and the graffiti says Veldiv in this image of a inner tube, like an inner tube, because Veldiv was a bicycle arena where, after the roundup of the French Jews by the French police, they were placed in this bicycle stadium for about a week without food, without services. And I felt that this was one of the major events showing the complicity of the French government in the persecution of Jews. Now I'm going to talk about this a little further. The only thing I would say is that the sign says post nobles for the law of the 12th, by the law of 12 April 1943. So you sort of wonder what 1943 was about. And I post the picture, I post the story of my cousin Henri, who was the same age I was and was rounded up in that raid. So anyway, so I'll talk about it when I go through the murals. Next slide. Before I went to Paris in 1988 and lived in the neighborhood that I had lived in, a friend of mine gave me a book about Paris graffiti. And Paris graffiti, a lot of it was just stenciled graffiti. And they were called pochoirs. And so I thought this was very interesting, and I would go and now I was going to talk about graffiti and my use of it, but I'm going to skip it for now because we don't have a whole lot of time. And I'm just going to show you some examples, and then I'll talk about it more completely when I talk about the murals. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the model of my paintings. This is a French wall with graffiti, and I'm going to try to, this is the composition element that I'm going. Now, in the next slide, this is a slide that was taken by Varian Fry, the American journalist who started the Rescue Committee. And he was taken by the fact that there was a graffiti war at the time in 1941, where the Pétainists, the people who supported Pétain, would write something, and at night the underground would come in and write something else. And this went on for a while in Marseille in 1941. And I got this slide from the Varian Fry archive in Columbia University. Next. Okay, this is this is a picture of a slide of an abandoned railroad station that circled Paris and was used until really the 80s and abandoned, and the youths of France just used it as a wall to put on graffiti. It's called Petite Ceinture, and I misspelled the word petite as Nadine pointed out, but I haven't written French for 70 years, so that was a mistake. All right, next slide. Is another picture of, and I was really taken by this display. Okay, next. Okay, this is the first mural. When I started the painting, the Veldy Roundup, I didn't have any idea about making a series of murals. And I tried to get a show in Paris and it never happened. And I decided that I would do these murals anyway. Okay, this is the first mural, and it's called The Fall of Paris, and June 12th, 1940. And the idea here is that I was going to do a classic theme of the war, war being a conflict between Mars and Venus. So I knew exactly what Venus I would choose. This was the Venus de Milo. So I painted the Venus de Milo, but I couldn't find an equivalent statue or image of Mars. I didn't want to paint Mars. I didn't want to paint, what was it? I didn't want to paint Hitler in detail. So I used a stamp and painted the etchings. Okay, next slide. Okay, this one I'm going to talk about the graffiti. This is about the Battle of Britain. And the importance of the Battle of Britain is that it was the first defeat of the German army. And it allowed Britain to stay unoccupied. And it allowed the French who wanted to continue the fight to go to England. And also the fact that eventually they used the base in Britain to land and liberate France. Now the graffiti, to me, graffiti is a metaphor for memory. My work is about memory, and I wanted to use that as a metaphor. Memory is very complicated and very involved, very similar to graffiti. Memory is, you don't have memory of, like it's not organized like a library. You don't go to a card catalog and find out where these memories are. It's all confused, complicated. Some memories appear unwanted. Some you have to search for a long time, and some you have to ignore as much as you can. So the graffiti, especially the graffiti this way, I mixed images of my life, contemporary images, contemporary graffiti, and it gives you a kind of palimpsest of images, and the images are a metaphor for memory. Next slide. Now, this slide was not originally in my idea for the murals. I only thought about 6 murals, but I felt I had to do a mural that explained what the situation in France was. So this is de Gaulle and Pétain, and it doesn't have a date, but it's the story of France. I'm using another antique mythology, the image of Jan. German to the occupation. So in here, I list the logos of de Gaulle and the Republic, Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité. And the other side, I have Pétain with a train, the train that was used, the French National Railroad, that was used to transport Jews to Germany in cattle cars. And there's the motto of the French state, and it says travail, famille, and patrie, which means work, family, and country. And where it says family, I use the smoke from the train to sort of smoke the family. And I'm putting posters which deal with Pétain and its collaboration with Germany. And on the other side, I have posters of de Gaulle's and the resistance. Next slide. This is a picture in 1940 of Pétain shaking hands with Hitler. Now, when the French saw this picture in October 1940, you got to remember they were occupied in June of 1940, and Pétain decided to collaborate with or at least to make an armistice with Hitler. Now, Hitler wanted Pétain to shake hands, and Pétain wouldn't do it unless French prisoners of war were treated like by the Geneva Conference and protected. And my father at that time had been taken prisoner by, my father had joined the French army. He was fighting at the front in 1939. And in 1940, he was taken prisoner. So actually, for me, this picture of Pétain shaking hands with Hitler sort of guaranteed that my father would survive the war. Next picture. This is the Veldiv Roundup. And like I said, it's a story of my cousin that's pasted on the wall that says, don't paste anything. My cousin was the same age. He was 1 month older than I was. And his parents lived in, worked in Paris in their shop. And while they were working, they had Henri sent to an aunt for babysitting. And the aunt was arrested during the Veldiv Roundup, and she took the child with him. And the short of it is that the parents survived the war, and the child was never found. Okay, next one. This is about the Battle of Stalingrad in 1940. This was the turning point. This was the second time that the German army was defeated. And it's in the style of a Soviet poster. Like I said, the graffiti is the present looking at the past. So what I have is references to the past, to Stalingrad. I also have, at the time that I was painting it, the Soviet Union was over. So I have like an ironic pattern of Marx and Lenin, and Stalin is sinking in the ground. Next picture. This is the picture for D-Day, which was the time that Paris started getting liberated. And actually, I was in Normandy, close to Normandy at the time of D-Day, and I remember the day well. Not the actual D-Day, but the day of D-Day. Anyway, I used the D-Day picture to give to give credit to all the women that helped me or supported me, the family women, and also women in World War II. So the top of the painting is all pictures of women that participated in the war. Women soldiers, women factory workers, and so on and so on. Next one, next picture. Okay, this is the finale. This is the liberation of Paris. And I'd like to go into it.
Your time is your time is up.
Okay. I would go into it more further, but basically what I'm trying to do here is create a triumphal arch. And the triumphal arch is because the French claimed that the French army and the resistance liberated Paris. But I know now that it was really the American army that liberated Paris. So anyway, I put the parade, the Gaulle's parade, on the 2 feet above the painting. They should have been in the middle. Well, what I'm putting in the middle is a scene from the Buchenwald concentration camp. And I don't know if you remember the graffiti that I showed about Varian Fry in Marseille in 1941. The graffiti that the French underground put was "Pensez et agissez français," which meant think and act French. So I'm using that graffiti on top of the front of the picture. And I could go on for a long time just talking about that, but I'm stopping. The only thing I want to show you is the next slide. This is the size of the painting. And the next slide. This is the D-Day painting. You can see the women pictures and okay.
You should say, Phil, I mean, I think this is an incredible series of paintings, like who does history paintings anymore? And this is an incredible history cycle covering the war, and it's only been shown in its entirety once, correct? In Nacogdoches.
Yeah, this is from the
where they have space.
This was a Nacogdoches show in Texas in 2002. And even the last one, the Liberation of Paris, wasn't even done at that time. So I only had six of the murals there.
So why don't we go to the other set of pictures?
So now we're going to talk about the background, my background.
And I should say, just for background purposes, it's not a coincidence that we both have the same last name. Phil is my uncle, and his brother is my father, who we'll see a picture of him soon. And so this is very much about my history even, and I always learn something new. I mean, one of the things that I really admire about your paintings, Phil, is how much research you do for every detail that's included. I mean, you're not a painter who works, out of just intuition and spirit. It's like every little detail has some thought behind it and a reason for being there.
Well, that's why I couldn't really talk about my murals in 20 minutes.
Yes, you can get the book, buy the book.
A lot of details and stories. Anyway, my mother, this is my mother and your grandmother. She was born in Paris in 1911, and her father was a furniture maker. He was born in Bialystok and came to France as a small child and became a furniture maker. And in 1914, he joined the French army and fought in the First World War and was wounded and had a rather long recovery, and came back in around 1918 after the war. And my mother was about 8 or 9 when he came back, and she wanted to learn to play the violin. So my grandfather bought her a violin, got her a teacher, and she started. And after about a year, the teacher came to her father and mother and said, "I can't teach her anymore. You have to get a much better teacher to teach her." And my mother was a prodigy and just picked up the violin and played it. And within a year was very capable. And by the time she had applied for prodigy status at the Paris Conservatory, she was already 11 and was considered too old. But she kept studying with a teacher who was a student of the conservatory, and became a violinist. At 16, she was concert master in an orchestra. Next.
So you should say that pictures of all these people appear in your murals.
Yeah. Okay, this is my father. My father was born in Poland in a small town, and in 1909, and he lived through the war in Poland. And after the war in 1921, at the age of 12, he decided, after an incident, he decided that there was no future for him in Poland. He asked for some money from relatives in the US and decided to leave home. He left home and he wanted to go to France. He had to cross, this by himself, he had to cross the Czech border, the German border, the Belgian border, the French border, and arrived in Paris in 1921 by himself with money. He found a place to live and he started working. In 1930s, he married my mother. He became a presser in men's clothing. And in 1939, after he had 2 children, us, he joined the French army. He joined the French army because he didn't have any papers. He was an illegal immigrant. And he wanted papers, and he joined the French army. By 1940, he was taken prisoner. Next picture. Next slide. Oops.
Somehow it doesn't work.
Oh no. You practice everything and nothing works.
Yeah, right. Kind of really interesting. Okay.
Well, maybe while we're waiting, there's definitely questions coming up.
Okay.
Sorry for my ignorance of history, but you've made an interesting dichotomy here that the French were fighting Hitler with the British. I think against the British yet, or with the British yet, rounding up Jews, and yet others hiding Jewish children. Do you have any comments about this?
About the,
I guess it's about how the French were some of them were shaking Hitler's hand, some of them were fighting with the British, some were hiding Jewish children, some were handing in Jewish children.
Yeah.
Uh,
My take on this is that French is like Humpty Dumpty, you know, like they're broken half. One half is doing something, the other half is doing something else, and they have a hard time putting it together. The fact is that at the beginning of the war, when they were occupied, a lot of French decided to leave France and continue the fight, and others wanted to stay and make accommodations. So, you know, it's like the US, you know, we're not really homogeneous, you know, there's a group that thinks this way and another group that thinks the opposite way, and they act accordingly.
Yeah,
So
but you should say that the reason you survived the war is that you were in a
yeah,
you were put in a
I was
village.
on the other side. We'll
Yeah.
go over that when we go to
Well, why don't you say it just because the slides aren't coming up?
okay,
I'm so
the slides
sorry.
aren't.
I'm trying to work on it. I'm so sorry.
So why don't you, Phil, why don't you talk about, you know, your experience
Yeah.
with the war?
Well, my mother, for some reason in 1942, when they started doing the roundups, decided that we should leave Paris. And she placed us in a town on the edge of Normandy named Oudon. And
There we go.
okay, we're back in the
Slides are
slide now.
back.
Okay, this is my father's prisoner of war ID picture with his number.
And that comes up quite a lot in your murals.
Yeah,
and-
this I use it a lot in my in my work. Next, this is my brother at the time of the war, and this is Nadine's father. Not then. Next, and this is me during the war. Next. Okay, this is Normandy. And if you look at the map on the right, you see on the bottom corner on the right, you see Chartres. And then if you move a little further, you see Giverny. Those of you know about Giverny. So Oudon, which is in the middle, right on the edge of the map, is between Giverny and Chartres. And the next town over is Normandy. And Normandy invasion happened here, and we were maybe, I would say, 100 miles from the beaches. Okay, next. Okay, this is in the middle of Oudon, in the middle of the town. This is a 12th century tower, and every time we went to school, we had to pass this tower, this 12th century tower. So that's one of the landmarks in that town. Next. Now this is a 14th and 15th century church. The 14th is one part, the 15th is an addition. And the town, our mother placed us in this town because it was a safe town. The Germans rounded people through the French police. There was an agreement they made at the time of the armistice that they would round up people that the Germans wanted rounded up. So everything was done through the French police. And this town, the French police director wasn't cooperating. And the priest of the town really was a leader and really protected the town. They not only had Jewish children in town, but they also had downed pilots and British and American downed pilots, which they had to repatriate. So the town was a safe town, and we were pretty much free to do whatever we wanted within reason. We went to school. And, you know, we didn't exactly walk around the town, but we, you know, going to school we did. Next. Oh, this is the house we lived in. It belonged to a doctor who left France to go to Morocco at the beginning of the war, and left the house, which is quite large, on the main street, in one of the main street in that town, in care of the caretakers. And the caretakers started taking in children of prisoners of war, and we were. This is where we lived. The upstairs were bedroom, and downstairs in the corner on the right was the kitchen, and the place that was sort of hung around. Next picture. Okay, this is a group of kids from. I don't know who was Jewish or who wasn't Jewish. This is something we didn't talk about. I didn't at that time. I didn't know what Jewish was. All I knew is that it wasn't good to say that you were Jewish. And on the top left is my brother, and I'm on the bottom right. That's me. And the reason it looks like I'm wearing a dress is these are aprons that we had to wear in school.
Can we go through these a little quicker because people have some questions to get to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Could we wait till the end, or?
Yeah, just go through these a little.
Yeah. Can you go back to the other slide? Yeah. This is the back of the house, and there was a large yard with trees and all that. So we spent a lot of time, the kids together, you know, like playing around this yard, and most of the time, it was kind of like a safe haven, and with kids running around. You know, it was like a playground. Okay, next. Okay, this is my brother and I in gleaning wheat, and I don't know what the people we were with did with the wheat, but we gleaned the wheat. And the people behind are the family that took care of us during the war.
Well, you're clearly French because you're wearing berets while you glean the wheat.
Yeah, well, that's all right. Next one. Okay, this is this bridge was right next to the house we lived in, and this is a picture of a time in June 1945 when my father came back. And this is a picture we took, my brother, myself, my mother. And this was the first time I met my father. I didn't know who he was. When my mother came to the town, she usually hitchhiked on the truck. And I see her getting out of the truck with this strange man, because at that time I had no idea that my father had been liberated. And then that strange man turned out to be my father. And we stayed in Udon through 1945 and didn't get back to our family in Paris until 1946. Next slide. Okay. In 1949, when I was 11, or almost 11, my father had family in America, and they kept pressing him to come because they had all these stories about Europe. And by 1949, we had pretty much gotten reestablished, and there was a question whether we would go or not. The reason we waited that long is that we had to come in under my father's Polish visa. If we had come under my mother's French visa, we would have gone right into France in 1946, 1947, into the US 1946, 47. But since my father was born in Poland, we had to go through the Polish quota, and the Polish quota was 3 years later than the French quota. So in 1949, my parents decided that we would move to the US. We would immigrate. Now, my life in France wasn't, for me, was fine. I liked being in Paris. Paris was great. So I didn't have the same anxiety that my parents had. But anyway, we came to the US on this ship, the Ile-de-France, and I made a series of prints of this ship, and this is the copy of 3 of them. And Nadine can tell you that. Oh yeah, the reason I named the print the Big Cheese, and I don't know if any of you remember, but they sold French cheese in this label, Ile-de-France. And every time I bought the cheese, I would look at the ship and say, oh, that's the ship I came to America on. So if you look at the slide back, can you send it? If you see the blue and red and the white in the middle. So I'm really styling this thing according to the cheese box. So I call it the Big Cheese.
So I should say that this print Phil recently gave to the Met, and we're going to put it on view in our gallery here. It changes every couple of months. It'll go up in end of May. And it'll be on view through the summer.
All right, next. Okay, now we talk about my education, my art education. This is Alan Capro, who really was very influential in my becoming an artist. And he was an artist, and he started the whole. He was one of the starters of the idea of happenings, and he was one of these happening artists. Klaus Oldenburg, Jim Dine, and other people were in that group, and he was one of them. And he was teaching at Rutgers. He was teaching art history at Rutgers, and he saw my work, and he decided that at the time I was a physics student, and he said, "You're not a physicist, you're an artist." And that's all I needed to hear, and I became an artist after I graduated. Nadine, you want to say something about Rutgers at the time?
Well, I think Rutgers was a very active art center at the time, right? All of these artists coming through. Philip Siegel was there, and lots of artists. George Siegel, sorry, were there.
Stein was there. Bob Watts, and at the time, 3 major American art movement were partly originated at Rutgers. It was the Happenings, Fluxus, and pop art. And I was there. I was a physics major. I wasn't really part of the group, but I really got involved with the group. And this is a picture of a sculpture by George Siegel that he did of my wife and myself. This was much later, and I think this picture is in the Williams University Art Department,
Clark Art Institute.
Yeah.
Or not the Clark, the Williams College Museum.
Williamstown, Massachusetts.
Yeah. Next.
So then in 1960, I was doing inflatable sculptures. And I had some shows exhibiting my sculpture. Excuse me. And I wanted someone else to manufacture my sculptures, um, because the process was a production process, and somehow I became involved in my own. I don't know. I maybe Nadine can help me explain how I got involved in this venture.
Inflatables. I don't know how you got involved, but you had a company that made inflatables, and I remember when I was growing up, they were everywhere. These inflatable pillows and little bags and things like that. Very pop art. You gave your inflatable chair to the Met, which we're very excited about. Some time
Yeah, and I
ago.
have one in Germany too.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
the
in Basel at the
Anyway, the way I got into this was that I had a friend from Rutgers who's a salesman, and I told him that I really needed someone to manufacture my my pillows and my sculptures. And he said, why don't you make me some samples of product, and I'll take it around and start selling it. And then we'll see about getting a factory to do your sculpture. So he started selling these pillows, like I did design a couple of pillows. He took them around to stores, and they sold like hotcakes. I mean, like within a year, we were selling like over $1 million worth of pillows. I mean, it just he was Indian, so he described it. It was like having a tiger by the tail. So one thing led to another, and all of a sudden, I was involved in this business of making pillows. Then, at a certain point, I had to design. I designed a chair. My partner took a little car seat that I did, inflatable car seat, and he took it to a producer at CBS, and the producer was producing the Walter Cronkite show, 21st Century, and all of a sudden she said, "Oh, can you make an inflatable chair that we can put on the show?" So Sujin, my partner, comes back and says, "Can you make an inflatable chair?" And I said, "Oh, sure, I can make an inflatable chair." And I didn't realize how hard it was to make an inflatable chair, but I did. And at the last minute, I was able to make the chair. But my partner not only wanted me to make a chair, but he wanted me to make a chair that when the broadcast came on television, the chair would be available for sale at one of the stores.
Smart.
Anyway,
why don't we, I know you could talk about all of this for a long time too, but why don't we circle back? There's some questions, and I know we only have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just going to show you the slides of the furniture. So
Okay.
this is the slide. This is the product, the chairs, the pillows, and table, and those things. Then next slide. This is a chair that I have in the Vitra Museum in Germany, and it's not original from that time. It's something that I rebuilt as a model. And next one. This is the chair that's in the Met. It's an original production chair of the inflatable chair. Okay.
Okay.
That's
So
my
people have questions about the size of the murals. Where are the murals now? What, I think you answered this a bit. Do you always work on such a large scale, or did you make it specific for the series of murals?
Yeah,
so
I
what
made
can you
it
say about the
specifically for the
scale?
series, but I had worked in large scale before. Like I said, as soon as I got this large studio, I started making large works. It sort of fit into the studio. But
Where are they
I
now?
did a lot of work before I did one of the large pieces. I didn't, like in 1989, 90, I did a lot of paintings, drawings, that where I was working on trying to find how to tell that story. So by the time I did the Beldi painting, I had done a lot of research and a lot of stuff. Right now, these murals are rolled up in my basement.
But if anyone has a space where they could be exhibited, we'd like to hear.
No, the problem is that really, I've shown the work in America, and people are very nice, but they don't really emotionally feel the stuff. The work should really be shown in France, but the French are not really ready to deal with this, and it's not very complimentary. Like countries don't like to hear about their past. They want to believe in the stories that they believe in. Like the same thing in the U.S. We don't want to hear about, like it's happening now. Like in Florida, they don't want to hear about slavery and all the other things. We don't want to hear about Native Americans. We want to hear about America the beautiful and America the land of opportunity. So France is the same way. They don't want to hear about their problematic past. They'd rather think that they're a modern intellectual society that's liberal.
Mhm.
And then there are a few questions about just the sources for some of the imagery that shows up in the backgrounds, like the metropolis image. What's the reason for that in your Battle of Britain?
Look, I said that the graffiti is really a metaphor for memory. Like my work is dealing with memory, and memory is the present looking at the past. Now, memory isn't neat. Memory has a lot of different images. It has actual experience, like my experience during World War II, but it also has books that I've read, movies that I've seen, discussions, other experiences. So it's really memory, if you really look at it, is a very jumble of images and ideas, all mixed up almost like graffiti if you want to show it all at once. But it appears one at a time from here, from there. So what I've done is taking images from different periods in time, from the present, graffiti from the present, graffiti from the past, art, family, political things, like it's a jumble, but it's like memory actually is. And that's why I felt that graffiti was such a good metaphor for remembering in graffiti, making it my own graffiti, not the general graffiti, not the kind that you see in the railroad station in France.
And some people are asking, some of it is collage and some of it is painted, correct? Your
Yes.
mix of
when I did the murals, I ordered them, or I showed them to you in chronological order, but I didn't make the murals in chronological order. I did the fourth one was first, then I did the first one, then I did the second one, then I did the fifth one, and then I didn't do the third one until later. Now, between the fifth one and the third one, I had a stroke. So I couldn't really do all the things that I used to do before. But since I didn't do the works chronologically, it doesn't show so much. But after 1994, when I had the stroke, I did more collage. So that's why the Pétain de Gaulle has a lot of posters pasted on. and the D-Day has a lot of photographs of women in World War II, and so forth, so on. So, and then by the end, by the last painting, I was more able to do the painting. So that's why there's collage and there's painting in it. And you know, you're talking about a situation where it took me 10 years to finish the series, at least. So that's the answer.
All right. Well, I think maybe
Yeah,
we should end it here. We're at 2 minutes over.
yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I see there's so many more questions, and but I'm glad that we started the conversation, and I'm happy that we'll be able to see the lithograph, the big cheese at the Met by the end of May. So we'll all be looking out for that.